The Sultan who became an exile. A sultan of Egypt, it is related, called a conference of learned men, and very soon, as is usually the case, a dispute arose. The subject was the night journey of the Prophet Muhammad. It is said that on that occasion the Prophet was taken from his bed up into the celestial spheres. During this period he saw paradise and hell, conferred with God 90,000 times, and had many other experiences, and was returned to his room while his bed was yet warm. A pot of water which had been overturned by the flight and spilled was still not empty when the Prophet returned. Some held that this was possible by a different measurement of time. The Sultan claimed that it was impossible. The sages said that all things were possible by divine power. This did not satisfy the king. The news of this conflict came at length to the Sufi Sheikh Shahabuddin, who immediately presented himself at court. The Sultan showed due humility to the teacher, who said, "I intend to proceed without further delay to my demonstration. For know now that both the interpretations of the problem are incorrect, and that there are demonstrable factors which can account for tradition without the need to resort to crude speculation or insipid and uninformed logicality." There were 4 windows in the audience chamber. The Sheikh ordered one to be opened. The Sultan looked out of it. On a mountain beyond he saw an invading army, a myriad, bearing down on the palace. He was terribly afraid. "Pray forget it, for it is nothing," said the Sheikh. He shut the window and opened it again. This time there was not a soul to be seen. When he opened another of the windows, the city outside was seen to be consumed by flames. The Sultan cried out in alarm. "Do not distress yourself, Sultan, for it is nothing," said the Sheikh. When he had closed and again opened the window, there was no fire to be seen. The 3rd window being opened revealed a flood approaching the palace. Then again, there was no flood. When the 4th window was opened, instead of the customary desert, a garden of paradise was revealed. And then, by the shutting of the window, the scene vanished as before. Now the Sheikh ordered a vessel of water to be brought, and the Sultan to put his head into it for a moment. As soon as he had done so, the Sultan found himself alone on a deserted seashore, a place which he did not know. At this magic spell of the treacherous Sheikh he was transported with fury, and vowed vengeance. Soon he met some woodcutters, who asked him who he was. Unable to explain his true state, he told them that he was shipwrecked. They gave him some clothes, and he walked to a town where a blacksmith, seeing him aimlessly wandering, asked him who he was. "A shipwrecked merchant, dependent upon the charity of woodcutters, now with no resources," answered the Sultan. The man then told him about a custom of that country. All newcomers could ask the first woman who left the bathhouse to marry him, and she would be obliged to do so. He went to the bath, and saw a beautiful maiden leaving. He asked her if she was married already, and she was. So he had to ask the next, an ugly one. And the next. The 4th was really exquisite. She said that she was not married, but pushed past him, affronted by his miserable appearance and dress. Suddenly a man stood before him and said, "I have been sent to find a bedraggled man here. Please, follow me." The Sultan followed the servant, and was shown into a wonderful house, in one of whose sumptuous apartments he sat for hours. Finally 4 beautiful and gorgeously attired women came in, preceding a 5th, even more beautiful. She the Sultan recognized as the last woman whom he had approached at the bathhouse. She welcomed him and explained that she had hurried home to prepare for his coming, and that her hauteur was only one of the customs of the country, practiced by all women in the street. Then followed a magnificent meal. Wonderful robes were brought and given to the Sultan, while delicate music was played. The Sultan stayed 7 years with his new wife, until they had squandered all her patrimony. Then the woman told him that he must now provide for her and their 7 sons. Recalling his first friend in the city, the Sultan returned to the blacksmith for counsel. Since the Sultan had no trade or training, he was advised to go to the marketplace and offer his services as a porter. In one day he earned, through carrying a terrible load, only 1/10 of the money which was needed for the food of the family. The following day the Sultan made his way to the seashore again, where he found the very spot from which he had emerged 7 long years before. Deciding to say his prayers, he started to wash in the water, when he suddenly and dramatically found himself back at the palace, with the vessel of water, the sheikh, and his courtiers.
7 years of exile, evil man, roared the Sultan. 7 years, a family, and having to be a porter? Have you no fear of God, the Almighty, for this deed?
But it is only a moment, said the Sufi master, since you put your head into this water. His courtiers bore out this statement. The Sultan could not possibly bring himself to believe a word of this. He started to give the order for the beheading of the sheikh. Perceiving by inner sense that this was to happen, the sheikh exercised the capacity called Ilm el-Ghaibat, the science of absence. This caused him to be instantly and corporeally transported to Damascus, many days' distance away. From here he wrote a letter to the king. 7 years passed for you, as you will now have discovered, during an instant of your head in the water. This happens through the exercise of certain faculties, and carries no special significance except that it is illustrative of what can happen. Was not the bed warm? Was not the water jar not yet empty in this tradition? It is not whether a thing has happened or not which is the important element. It is possible for anything to happen. What is, however, important is the significance of the happening. In your case, there was no significance. In the case of the Prophet, there was significance in the happening. It is stated that every passage in the Quran has 7 meanings, each applicable to the state of the reader or listener. This tale, like many others of the Sufi kind, emphasizes the dictum of Muhammad: speak to everyone in accordance with the degree of his understanding. The Sufi method, according to Ibrahim Kawas, is demonstrate the unknown in terms of what is called known by the audience. This version is from the manuscript called Hu Nama, the Book of Hu, in the collection of the Nawab of Sadhana, dated 1596. The story of fire. Once upon a time, a man was contemplating the ways in which nature operates, and he discovered, because of his concentration and application, how fire could be made. This man was called Nur. He decided to travel from one community to another, showing people his discovery. Nur passed the secret to many groups of people. Some took advantage of the knowledge. Others drove him away, thinking that he must be dangerous, before they had had time to understand how valuable this discovery could be to them. Finally, a tribe before which he demonstrated became so panic-stricken that they set about him and killed him, being convinced that he was a demon. Centuries passed. The first tribe which had learned about fire reserved the secret for their priests, who remained in affluence and power while the people froze. The second tribe forgot the art and worshipped instead the instruments. The third worshipped a likeness of Nur himself, because it was he who had taught them. The fourth retained the story of the making of fire in their legends. Some believed them, some did not. The fifth community really did use fire, and this enabled them to be warmed, to cook their food, and to manufacture all kinds of useful articles. After many, many years, a wise man and a small band of his disciples were travelling through the lands of these tribes. The disciples were amazed at the variety of rituals which they encountered, and one and all said to their teacher, "But all these procedures are in fact related to the making of fire, nothing else. We should reform these people." The teacher said, "Very well then, we shall restart our journey. By the end of it, those who survive will know the real problems and how to approach them." When they reached the first tribe, the band was hospitably received. The priests invited the travellers to attend their religious ceremony, the making of fire. When it was over, and the tribe was in a state of excitement at the event which they had witnessed, the master said, "Does anyone wish to speak?" The first disciple said, "In the cause of truth, I feel myself constrained to say something to these people." "If you will do so at your own risk, you may do so," said the master. Now the disciple stepped forward in the presence of the tribal chief and his priests, and said, "I can perform the miracle which you take to be a special manifestation of deity. If I do so, will you accept that you have been in error for so many years?" But the priests cried, "Seize him!" and the man was taken away, never to be seen again. The travellers went to the next territory, where the second tribe were worshipping the instruments of fire-making. Again, a disciple volunteered to try to bring reason to the community. With the permission of the master, he said, "I beg permission to speak to you as reasonable people. You are worshipping the means whereby something may be done, not even the thing itself. Thus you are suspending the advent of its usefulness. I know the reality that lies at the basis of this ceremony." This tribe was composed of more reasonable people, but they said to the disciple, "You are welcome as a traveller and stranger in our midst, but as a stranger, foreign to our history and customs, you cannot understand what we are doing. You make a mistake. Perhaps even you are trying to take away or alter our religion. We therefore decline to listen to you." The travellers moved on. When they arrived in the land of the third tribe, they found before every dwelling an idol representing Nur, the original firemaker. The third disciple addressed the chiefs of the tribe. "This idol represents a man who represents a capacity which can be used." "This may be so," answered the Nur worshippers, "but the penetration of the real secret is only for the few." "It is only for the few who will understand, not for those who refuse to face certain facts," said the third disciple. "This is rank heresy, and from a man who does not even speak our language correctly, and is not a priest ordained in our faith," muttered the priests, and he could make no headway. The band continued their journey, and arrived in the land of the fourth tribe. Now a fourth disciple stepped forward in the assembly of the people. "The story of making fire is true, and I know how it may be done," he said. Confusion broke out within the tribe, which split into various factions. Some said,
This may be true, and if it is, we want to find out how to make fire.
When these people were examined by the master and his followers, however, it was found that most of them were anxious to use fire-making for personal advantage, and did not realize that it was something for human progress. So deep had the distorted legends penetrated into the minds of most people, that those who thought they might in fact represent truth were often unbalanced ones, who could not have made fire even if they had been shown how. There was another faction who said,
"Of course the legends are not true. This man is just trying to fool us, to make a place for himself here."
And a further faction said, "We prefer the legends as they are, for they are the very mortar of our cohesion. If we abandon them, and we find that this new interpretation is useless, what will become of our community then?" And there were other points of view as well. So the party travelled on, until they reached the lands of the fifth community, where fire-making was a commonplace, and where other preoccupations faced them. The master said to his disciples, "You have learnt how to teach, for man does not want to be taught. First of all, you will have to teach people how to learn, and before that, you have to teach them that there is still something to be learned. They imagine that they are ready to learn, but they want to learn what they imagine is to be learned, not what they have first to learn. When you have learned all this, then you can devise the way to teach. Knowledge without special capacity to teach is not the same as knowledge and capacity." Ahmed el-Badawi, died 1276, is reputed to have said, in answer to the question, "What is a barbarian?" "A barbarian is one whose perceptions are so insensitive that he thinks that he can understand by thinking or feeling something which can be perceived only through development and constant application to the striving towards God." Men laugh at Moses and Jesus, either because they are utterly insensitive, or because they have concealed from themselves what these people really meant when they talked and acted. According to Dervish law, he was accused of preaching Christianity by Muslims, but repudiated by Christians because he refused to accept later Christian dogma literally. He was the founder of the Egyptian Badawi order.